Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another video here on the Sports Daily Media Network YouTube channel. I'm your host, Sean Vowells. I'm joined by Joe Meade, and tonight it's the Notre Dame Penn State recap, the Capital One Orange Bowl, also the college football playoff semifinal. Joe, it's a game that goes back and forth a couple of different ways, but it's the Fighting Irish of Notre Dame who win 27-24. What were your kind of overarching thoughts on this one?
I thought overall, just starting off, the first half, you thought Penn State had played pretty well. They definitely had the better of the play. But the biggest red flag had to be the fact they were only up by a score of 10-3 at halftime. I felt the way they played probably could have given them a two-score lead. And unfortunately for Penn State, that ultimately caught up to them at the end. Notre Dame completely dominated the third quarter. And though the fourth quarter was pretty balanced, Penn State made the fatal mistake if I were to give this recap to someone 30 years later about this game from the future. That's how this game is going to be remembered, and it's going to be the fact that Penn State made the critical error once again in the big game. And I think they had a really successful year. They got back to Indy, their first Final Four in the CFP, but ultimately to lose like this, and as Penn State fans will tell you, and as you've probably seen by a lot of their reactions to the past few days, this is just nothing new for them, and it's the same devastating feeling they've had.
Yeah, we'll take them through the game here, Joe. They did go up 10-0. A Notre Dame field goal just before halftime really changed the game, I think. Riley Leonard left the game with a head injury. He ended up returning after halftime, but backup Steve Angeli gets him into field goal range. They hit that. Then they get the ball first in the second half, and they go down in 5 or 6 plays, and just like that, it was tied 10-10. That was a big momentum switch. Notre Dame has now 2 games in a row had the ball to start the second half, scored right before. They've completely flipped the last 2 games in their favor because of that. But then, Joe, it goes back and forth. Notre Dame takes the lead. Penn State scores 2 in a row, and it looks like that Penn State's going to sneak out. But then Riley Leonard hits Jaden Greathouse for an explosive play. They tie it, and then the play that many Penn State fans will unfortunately remember for a while is Drew Aller trying to push it down the field, ends up throwing the interception, and then Notre Dame gets it close enough for Mitch Sheeter to hit from 41 yards. But, Joe, this was truly the most back and forth game that we've seen in the college football playoffs so far. And not exactly the way that Notre Dame's won games this year. They've gotten in front in the lead, and they've played from ahead and done a really good job of taking games over when they get the lead. That's not really what they did here. They struggled on the ground, and they relied on a couple of explosive plays through the air to get the job done. But you got to give Notre Dame credit for doing it in a way that they really haven't done all year.
Yeah, Sean, I want to point something out. Besides the play where Riley Leonard threw that terrible interception, I think it was by then it was probably the very end of the third quarter or beginning of the fourth. Uh, they sustained drives in the second half, even when they did not score. They had the touchdown. They had a possession where they had 4 plays, but they did get the first down, got it to midfield, and was able to pin Penn State back. That's what made a difference. Penn State so often in this playoff took advantage of malfeasance from the other team, whether that was SMU, Boise State, and that's something they've done all year, including in the Ohio State game, which they lost. They're a team that plays very good complementary football because of that great defense they have and the great unit that was coordinated by Tom Allen. But aside from that one interception shot, Notre Dame didn't give them that many opportunities to capitalize and really break out the way they have, because we've seen it so many times this year, Sean, where Penn State before the half would score, they get the ball back in the second half, and they kind of go have a 2-for-1 and cash in on both ends, and that's normally what put the game away. And without Penn State doing that in this game, that's what allowed Notre Dame to stay in it, kind of get all that momentum back in the third quarter, and that, as we've discussed so many times today, that fourth quarter having that late play go against Penn State and in the favor of Notre Dame, which is particularly impressive because you look at their stat sheet, you look at the game itself. The running game was not so dominant. I just thought Riley Leonard made the better of the decisions. I know he had the 2 picks, but at the same time, Sean, the second half, he only made one bad decision. I thought Drew Aller and Penn State really got away with two, where a penalty was called, and I'm not disagreeing with the call, but let's face it, Sean, if this game was in South Bend, those flags aren't thrown. So Penn State was fortunate a few times, but could get lucky ultimately at the end.
Yeah, and if you just were to look at the box score here, Joe, from Notre Dame's side, I think you don't think that they win this game. You see Steve Angeli comes in for a little bit. Jeremiah Love just 45 yards. Leonard just 35. You do have, 3 passing plays over 30 yards, which I think really made a difference. They haven't been able to do that at times this year, but Penn State took them out of what they wanted to do. Notre Dame had to adjust, and in the college football playoff, Marcus Freeman has been the first coach to adjust compared to who he's playing. And that ultimately was the difference in this one. We'll spend an entire video eulogizing Penn State's offseason. Our season recaps are coming up for the Big Ten football teams. So, Joe, we'll do a video on that. But obviously, you have to feel for Drew Aller. He had a really good season for Penn State. This is what the season is going to be remembered. I guess his decision on whether to go to the NFL draft is still up in the air. Highly unlikely at this point. But Nick Singleton finds the end zone 3 times for Penn State. Katron Allen gets 82 yards. Also, Tyler Warren has a really good game. But, Joe, the stat that people are repeating is that a Penn State wide receiver did not catch a ball for positive yards in this game. Certainly didn't realize that when the game was going on because Warren is such a weapon, definitely their number one pass catcher. But with only 12 completions, you can understand that maybe something like this could happen.
Yeah, Sean, and ultimately, you have to give credit to Al Golden as I've given credit to Tom Allen. Mitch Evans. I know Jane Greathouse had that game tying TD to make it 24 all, but at the same time, I thought Al Golden did a great job containing Tyler Warren. He really challenged Penn State to say, "Hey, I know you have an elite tight end just like we do, maybe even more of an elite tight end than Mitchell Evans, but we're going to make someone else beat us." And ultimately, Notre Dame had someone else beat Penn State, and Penn State didn't have somebody beat Notre Dame's secondary, which I think a lot of people graded out Notre Dame's secondary is better than Penn State's, and it kind of showed, right? Uh, the Penn State receivers clearly did nothing. Tyler Warren had an efficient game. 6 catches, 75 yards for a tight end is great, but take into account what else was limited.
Yeah, Notre Dame will take that stat line every day.
Any day of the week, Sean. And then on the flip side of it, Penn State's defense, well, I thought they did a pretty good job. They got to Riley Leonard a lot. In spite of some of the injuries they had, you can tell Abdul Carter was not necessarily 100%. He still got back there. But, Sean, they had their other guys convert. They had Jaden Greathouse convert, Williams convert, and even some of the running backs on certain runs would convert. So Penn State, just a few too many plays too short. And the problem is it's a strict margin between a national championship winning team, a national championship game appearance, and bowing out in the round of 4. We've seen that with Michigan in 2022. We certainly saw that with Ohio State in 2022. And it doesn't take away anything from their season because to get this far is a heck of an accomplishment. And Penn State did things that I don't think they have done. Well, certainly in terms of making the Final Four, they haven't done. But this is something to be like top 3 nationally as a program consistently throughout the year. They haven't been really doing that since the late 2000s. Like 2008 was probably the year that came to mind for me. So significant progress as a program, but certainly a ways to go. And that's not necessarily an insult. I'm saying they're a top 5 program in the country as of this year. So into the offseason they go.
And Joe, with the way that the playoff is set up, with the way the Big Ten is set up, this should happen most years for Penn State. They should be able to get to the playoff, I'll say 3 out of 4 times. Just you get one freebie every 4 years, but I know schedules can end up in a tough spot. Maybe you have a really awful schedule one year and stuff like that can happen, but the margin for error is a little bigger for Penn State in this 12-team era, and I don't think that this season is like going to be an outlier by any means. And I mean that in a good way. I do think that they can get back to a spot like this with potential seeding rules changing. Penn State would have gotten a bye this year had that been the case. Obviously it's easier to win 3 games than 4. So I think there is a lot to look forward to from Penn State. It was a step in the right direction, better than the last couple years. And in terms of Notre Dame, Joe, well, they've got another video coming. Penn State does have their season recap video coming too, but Notre Dame has their national championship game preview coming. So I think we're going to wrap this one up here unless you got anything else.
No, Sean, and check out our other our other recap video followed by that preview video, as we just said.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.